He mocked her faith, but God made him fall for her grace. Have you ever loved someone who despised what was sacred to you? Have you ever felt your heart tremble when your faith was ridiculed and still chose to respond with grace? This is the story of Ava, an ordinary woman with silent courage, and Evan, a man who used sarcasm as a shield, until an unexpected encounter with grace began to tear down his walls. Stay with me until the end. There's a scene that will change the way you see forgiveness, because sometimes God doesn't win battles with noise, he wins them with kindness. And when grace enters the scene, even mockers learn to listen. Take a breath. Close your eyes for a second. Ask yourself, what if kindness is the most powerful weapon in this story?
God made him fall for
When you
her
open them
grace.
again, you'll walk with Ava through the streets of a small American town. Smell the fresh coffee in the morning air. Feel the drizzle on the rooftops and the steps of someone returning without admitting he's lost. Ready? Then come. This isn't just about faith versus sarcasm. It's about a God who turns mockery into reverence and pride into surrender. Morning rose with a thin mist over the wooden houses as the flag in the town square moved lazily in the wind. Ava crossed the street wearing a simple coat, her hair tied up in a loose bun. In her hand, a well-worn Bible, its pages marked with colorful notes. She worked at the Blue Sparrow Café, where the scent of cinnamon always arrived before she did. In the window, apple pies, handwritten notes of encouragement, and a quiet Bible verse. Nothing shouted, everything welcomed. And yet some people still felt the urge to mock. Evan parked the rented car in a visitor spot, dark glasses hiding the exhaustion in his eyes. It was his first time back in town since college, a return without an announcement, just necessity. The success he once dreamed of had turned into a list of achievements and sleepless nights. He told himself he was above all that: faith, miracles, sentiment. But lately the silence after victory sounded louder than the applause. Strong coffee, stable Wi-Fi, no sermons, he muttered, pushing the door open. A small bell rang, too gentle for someone used to building walls. Good morning. Ava greeted, her smile soft but sincere. Morning? He replied automatically, like signing a receipt he hadn't read. Behind her a chalkboard read, "Gentleness disarms the weary heart." Evan raised an eyebrow. Gentleness, heart, weary. It felt oddly directed. "Double latte, no foam," he ordered, trying to control the scene. "Sure thing. Would you like a slice of apple pie? It's on the house today." "What's the catch?" He smirked, expecting a sermon disguised as dessert. Ava kept making the coffee, her movement steady, calm. Steam rose, surrounding Evan like autumn fog. "No catch. Sometimes people just need a better start to their day," she said. "You're religious, aren't you?" He asked, his tone half mocking, half curious. "I believe," she replied softly. "But I don't have to prove it to you today." She slid the cup toward him, the espresso's aroma smelling more like return than escape. "Thanks, I guess," he muttered, not knowing why he said it. At the next table, an elderly couple shared a muffin and a memory. Across the room, a student scribbled the word forgiveness in bold letters on a notebook. The whole place seemed to hum the same theme while Evan tried to ignore it. He picked up his phone but couldn't dive into the noise. There was a silence under the chatter, strange but real. Ava brought the pie, the crust still warm, and a napkin with sparrows sketched on it. "Sparrows always find shelter," she said. "It's just a doodle, no sermon." "Are you people always like this?" Evan asked, suspicious yet intrigued. "Like what?" "Kind, it's suspicious." Ava bit her lip lightly, the kind of smile that softens storms. "Sometimes we learn to be kind because we know what it's like to need kindness. And God has something to do with that?" "For me, everything," she answered without raising her voice. He ran a finger along the edge of the cup, feeling the warmth as if it dared him to care. "I don't buy into that," he said, staring at the chalkboard again. "That's okay. Coffee doesn't require faith, just time," Ava replied. Simple words, heavy as an anchor. Evan looked away. Someone who didn't argue felt dangerous to his pride. "You're not going to try to convert me?" "Not today," she said. "Today I just want you to eat while it's warm." The bell rang again. An old man entered, leaning on a cane. "Mr. Whitman," Ava called, already preparing a smaller cup with extra sugar. "You remembered," he said, touched by her attention. "Who could forget who needs extra sugar?" She laughed. Evan watched her. She seemed to read invisible maps of people's needs, a quiet cartographer of compassion, and for a moment he wished he spoke that language. "So, are you from around here?" Ava asked when she returned. "Used to be." Left, grew up, made it. He mimed quotation marks in the air. And now you're back. Just temporary, he said quickly, as if afraid of roots. Temporary can still be sacred, she replied, wiping the counter. You talk like nothing's ever really lost. Maybe what we lose is just being relocated. Evan laughed, not mockingly, but with unease. Do you always have an answer for everything? Not even for myself sometimes. There was a soft pause where honesty fit perfectly. And that verse, he pointed at the chalkboard, is that about me? It's for whoever's tired today. And every day someone is. I'm not sure if I'm tired, he said, though he knew he was. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves in slow spirals. Ava opened the side window. The smell of rain drifted in. Rain coming? Evan asked, just to keep her talking. Yes, but we've got spare umbrellas, she smiled, pointing to a basket. You people think of everything. Grace thinks ahead of us, she replied, amused by her own pun. He almost smiled back, but stopped himself. And the church? He tested the word like stepping on thin ice. 2 blocks down. Blue door, sparrow windows like the napkin. You sing? Preach? I listen. And sometimes I make coffee after service. Sounds like a good gig for failed saints, he teased. Ava tilted her head, recognizing the wound behind the joke. And for the weary who still don't know where it hurts. The student left, thanking her for the outlet. Mr. Whitman waved goodbye, promising to see her Sunday. Ava rearranged the cups. Evan felt the urge to speak again. I lost some things along the way, he confessed, surprising himself. Things you loved or just used? She asked gently. I don't know the difference anymore. Then maybe it's time to find out. He thought of the city, the contracts, the hollow victories. The last argument with someone who once tried to care. Do you really believe God cares? About me? He whispered, almost ashamed. I believe God cares for sparrows, she said softly. And you're worth more than many sparrows. The doorbell jingled again, but no one entered. Just the wind, reminding him that doors breathe too. That's beautiful, he murmured, almost afraid to mean it. The clock read 10:17. A woman dropped off a box of donations for the local shelter. Ava signed the slip. You do this often? Evan asked. Grace becomes routine when you let it. I wouldn't even know where to start. Start where you are, with what you have, she said. He looked at his coffee and somehow it made sense. What if I laugh at your faith? He asked, testing her boundaries. I'll still serve you coffee, she said calmly. That's it? And I'll pray that kindness surprises you someday. You're not going to argue with me? Grace rarely wins by shouting. He bit into the pie, apple, sugar, and stubborn innocence. Rain finally began to fall in gentle threads. Ava hurried to place a bucket under a leaky corner of the window. The roof's still waiting for its miracle, she joked. I can fix that, Evan said without thinking. Really? I know some people. I'll handle it. Thank you, she smiled, eyes bright with gratitude, not debt. He typed something on his phone, saved a contact, and felt the pull to stay. Were you always like this? He asked again. No, I learned between losses and forgiveness. Forgiveness? The word felt heavy on his tongue. Grace is a school where we keep retaking the lessons, she said. I've failed most of them. Then you've probably understood the subject best. The cafe slowed down. Rain tapped rhythmically on the awning. Ava filled thermoses for the church's Saturday lunch. You serve food there too? Soup, bread, and thyme. Time's the ingredient the world's running out of. Evan thought of the schedule that ruled his life like a polite tyrant. Maybe he was hungry for something else. Can I help on Saturday? He asked, almost apologizing for asking. Ava held his gaze without turning it into ritual. You can. Come early, blue door. You'll know it by the sparrows. He nodded, not understanding why it felt like signing a silent covenant. Outside, the rain washed the streets patiently. Inside, something quietly washed an old memory inside him. Thanks for the coffee, he said, rising. No longer the same man who walked in. Before leaving, he read the chalkboard again. Gentleness disarms the weary heart. And he smiled, afraid of the truth because it had already started to win. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in the smell of rain and roasted coffee beans. Ava opened the cafe earlier than usual, humming softly while wiping the counter. Outside, puddles reflected the church's blue door across the street. She didn't expect Evan to come. Most people's promises vanished with the weather, but something in her heart whispered otherwise. Grace had a strange way of keeping appointments. At 8:03, the bell rang. He was there, slightly wet from the drizzle, holding 2 umbrellas as if one were a peace offering. "I figured you might need a spare," he said, setting the umbrella down. Ava smiled. "You remembered the door." "I remember everything that makes no sense," he admitted, his tone half joking, half real. She poured 2 coffees, one black, one with cream, and slid his across the table.
"Do you usually volunteer on weekends?"
he asked. "Usually? No. Faith made me love interruptions." He laughed quietly, not sure if he admired or feared that. They walked together to the church, steam from their cups rising into the cold air. The town was waking slowly. Shop doors creaked open, children ran with wet shoes. Evan looked around as if seeing everything for the first time. "This place feels smaller than I remember," he said. "Or maybe you just got too big," Ava replied gently. He chuckled. "You're not afraid of telling the truth, are you?" "Truth isn't the enemy," she answered. "It's just brighter than we like sometimes." Inside the church basement, volunteers were setting tables and unpacking loaves of bread. Ava tied her hair back and put on an apron, moving like she belonged there. Evan hesitated, standing by the door as if afraid to contaminate something sacred. "You can hand out the bread," she said, breaking the tension with simplicity. "I don't think I qualify for that." "Bread doesn't check resumes." He smiled despite himself taking the tray. An older woman named Martha gave him a nod of approval. "You're new here. Ava recruits the good ones," she said warmly. "I'm not." "Good," Evan replied before catching himself. "Then you'll fit right in." Martha winked. Ava overheard and bit back a smile. It wasn't a sermon, but it landed like one. By the time the doors opened, Evan had already forgotten why he came. People began to arrive, some with hunger in their stomachs, others in their eyes. Ava moved between tables, offering soup and words that weren't polished, just real. Evan handed out bread quietly, unsure why his chest felt lighter. One boy smiled up at him, crumbs on his face. "Thanks, mister." Evan froze. No one had said thank you to him in a long time without wanting something. Ava saw the moment but didn't interrupt. Grace didn't rush revelations. It just held the silence open. When the line slowed, Ava sat across from him with 2 bowls of soup. "You did good," she said simply. "I didn't mock anyone today," he answered, half a joke, half confession. "That's progress," she teased. He stirred his soup and glanced around. "Do you ever get tired of believing?" She looked at him for a long second before answering. "Faith isn't about not getting tired. It's about knowing where to rest." The words hung in the air like incense, light but impossible to ignore. Evan leaned back, his walls shifting almost imperceptibly. "Where did you learn to talk like that?" "From pain mostly," Ava said. "And from watching God turn ashes into warmth." He nodded slowly, eyes on the steam rising from the soup. "Maybe I should take that class someday." "Enrollment's open," she smiled. "No prerequisites except honesty." When they finished serving, Ava helped clean the tables. Evan grabbed a towel, drying dishes beside her. "This isn't how I pictured my Saturday," he said. "How did you picture it?" "Emails, deadlines, pretending to be too busy to feel anything." "Sounds exhausting." It was. Maybe that's why I came back. Ava didn't press him. Grace had its own rhythm. Instead, she told him about her late father, a carpenter who built benches for the church. He used to say, "If you can't preach with words, preach with wood." Evan smiled faintly. "So you inherited the preaching gene?" "No," she laughed. "The building one. I just build people now instead of benches." He laughed too, softly, like a man remembering something human. The echo of it filled the room with warmth. Later, as the volunteers left, rain began again outside. Ava stood at the doorway, watching the gray streets glisten. Evan handed her the second umbrella he'd brought earlier. "Looks like it's your turn to need one." She accepted it, their fingers brushing lightly, a spark too small to name. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, but something in his chest tightened instead of easing. They walked side by side toward the cafe, steps sinking naturally. Cars passed slowly through puddles. The sky looked painted in muted silver. "Do you really think people change?" he asked suddenly. "I don't think," Ava replied. "I've seen it. And if they don't, then Grace waits longer." He stared at her like she had just rewritten a law of physics. Back at the cafe, she hung the umbrella on a hook and wiped her shoes. Evan lingered near the door, unwilling to leave yet afraid to stay. "Coffee on the house," she said. "Volunteers get rewards." "I'll take that," he smiled, following her to the counter. "Same order?" "Yeah, and maybe a slice of whatever forgiveness tastes like." Ava's laugh filled the room like light breaking through rain clouds. While she served him, he noticed the small details he'd ignored before. The chipped mug she always used, the little vase of daisies near the register, the way her eyes softened whenever she listened instead of spoke. It wasn't performance. It was presence. And for a man who lived surrounded by noise, presence felt foreign and holy. "Why do you care so much?" he asked suddenly. "Because someone cared when I didn't deserve it," she replied without hesitation. Evan stared into his coffee, seeing his reflection swirl in the dark surface. "I'm not that kind of person," he murmured. "Not yet," she corrected softly. He looked up, caught off guard by the certainty in her tone. "You really think people can go from mocker to believer?" "I've seen worse transformations," she said with a knowing smile. "And some of them started with sarcasm." He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "You're unbelievable." "Good thing I believe enough for both of us," she said, teasing back. The moment lingered, warm, disarming. For the first time in years, Evan didn't feel the need to win the conversation. He just wanted to understand. The cafe felt smaller now, not because it was, but because the space between them had shortened. Even silence had softened. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated near the counter. "Do you work every day?" "Almost, except Sundays. That's my day for music and long walks." "Music?" "Piano at the church. Nothing fancy. Just notes that remind me I'm still breathing." "I'd like to hear that sometime," he said without realizing it sounded like a wish. Ava smiled. "Maybe you will." Outside, the clouds began to part just enough for light to find the windows. Evan stepped onto the sidewalk, but something made him look back. Through the glass, Ava was cleaning tables again, humming quietly. No spotlight, no audience, just grace in motion. He felt a pull like gravity disguised as peace, and for the first time he didn't resist it. He let the stillness stay. That night, back in his rented apartment, Evan sat by the window. Rain tapped lightly against the glass, echoing the rhythm of the cafe bell in his mind. He opened his laptop, tried to drown himself in work, but nothing held him. Every line of code, every message felt suddenly hollow. He closed it, sat in silence. Somewhere inside him, something small began to thaw, and he hated how much relief it brought. He didn't pray. He didn't know how. But before sleeping, he whispered into the dark, unsure if anyone listened. "If you're real, maybe send her more umbrellas." Outside, thunder rolled softly like distant laughter. Evan lay there, caught between skepticism and surrender. And somewhere in the night, a quiet voice whispered back, not to his ears, but to his heart. It didn't say believe. It said come closer. Sunday sunlight filtered through gray clouds as church bells began to echo across town. Evan stood at his apartment window, holding the same umbrella from yesterday. He had told himself he wouldn't go, but his steps already knew the way. Down below, the streets shimmered with puddles and reflections of stained glass. He exhaled, grabbed his coat, and whispered to no one, "I'll just listen." Sometimes rebellion sounds like surrender, and God, smiling quietly, knows the difference. The church with the blue door looked smaller up close, yet heavier with meaning. Evan hesitated on the steps, memories of childhood services flickering like ghosts. Back then, faith had felt like rules, not refuge. But when he saw Ava inside, hands clasped in silent prayer, something in him paused. She wasn't performing. She was simply being. And in that stillness, he found more honesty than in any boardroom he'd ever led. He slipped into a back pew, unseen but not untouched. The music began. Soft piano, faint voices, no showmanship, just soul. Ava's hands moved across the keys gently, each note a heartbeat disguised as sound. Evan closed his eyes, letting the melody spill through the cracks of disbelief. He wasn't ready to pray, but he was finally quiet enough to hear. The lyrics spoke of grace that finds you even when you run. And he wondered, what if running was the first step toward being found? Tears gathered before pride could explain them away. After service, people lingered, shaking hands, sharing warmth. Ava stayed by the piano, cleaning the keys with a small cloth. Evan approached slowly, unsure whether to speak or confess. "I didn't plan to come," he said, voice half hidden in nervous laughter. "That's usually how Grace works," she smiled. "Do you always turn strangers into volunteers?" "Only the ones God keeps sending back." They walked outside. The sky was clearing, sunlight filtering through thin clouds. Evan squinted at the brightness, muttering, "Feels like a spotlight." "Maybe it's just clarity," Ava replied. He smiled sideways. "Clarity's overrated." "So is control," she countered softly. He looked at her, startled by how right she sounded. For someone who believed in unseen things, Ava had an uncanny way of seeing people. They stopped by a park bench near the fountain where children threw pennies. Evan sat, elbows on knees, searching for words. "I used to mock people who prayed," he admitted. "I know," Ava said. He frowned. "How?" "Because you still mock yourself for wanting to." Her answer landed like truth disguised as mercy. And for a long moment he couldn't look away. "You really think God listens to people like me?" Ava smiled gently. "Especially people like you. But I've said awful things, done worse. And yet here you are. Maybe guilt's not a punishment, it's an invitation." He swallowed hard, staring at the ripples in the fountain water. "Do you ever doubt?" "Every day," she said. "But faith isn't the absence of doubt, it's the decision to stay." The words settled into him like rain soaking dry ground. He took a deep breath as if testing the air for something invisible. "I'm not sure I can pray," he said.
"Then don't, just talk," Ava replied.
"To who?" "To the one who already knows." Silence followed, but this time it wasn't empty. That afternoon they returned to the cafe. Sunlight poured through the windows, catching the golden edges of coffee cups. Ava wrote a small phrase on the chalkboard. "Grace begins where control ends." Evan read it and chuckled. "Are you sure this place isn't secretly a therapy office?" "Maybe it is. The price of healing just happens to be caffeine." He laughed, the sound freer than before. Somehow, laughter had turned into prayer without permission. He helped her restock shelves, pretending it was just courtesy. But the truth was, he didn't want the day to end. Every moment with her felt like oxygen after years underwater. "You know what's strange?" he said. "What?" "Everything here feels slower, but somehow fuller." "Maybe you were living fast but empty," she said. "Grace slows you down so you can actually live." Evan leaned against the counter, thoughtful. "You really believe God's that personal?" "I've never met him any other way," Ava said, wiping her hands on a towel. He hesitated. "And what if I don't deserve that kind of attention?" "Then you're finally ready to receive it." Her voice was soft but carried authority that didn't come from pride. He nodded slowly, looking at her like a man reading his first scripture. And something inside him whispered, "Stay." As the afternoon faded, the cafe emptied again. Ava brewed one last pot and Evan stayed, claiming he'd help close. "Do you always serve everyone else before yourself?" he asked. "It's how I remember who I am." "Doesn't that get exhausting?" "Sometimes. But grace refills what kindness spends." Her words painted a truth he hadn't realized he'd needed to hear. He took a slow sip of his coffee, watching the way light framed her face. "I don't get it," he said finally. "Get what?" "How you can believe after everything this world breaks." Ava paused, setting her cup down gently. "Because broken things make room for light," she said. "That's how I met God, in the cracks." Evan exhaled, realizing his life was full of cracks he'd spent years hiding. The clock ticked softly. Time itself seemed to respect the moment. "You ever think maybe we're too far gone?" he asked. Ava looked straight into his doubt. "Grace doesn't measure distance, it measures direction." He blinked, taken aback. "You talk like you've been rescued." "I have," she said. And for the first time he wanted to know how. Before he could ask, a young woman entered with a donation box. "Hi, Ava." "Sorry I'm late," she said, placing it on the counter. "No worries, Emma," Ava smiled. "You remember Evan?" "Of course," Emma said cheerfully. "The guy who mocked the verse but stayed for pie." Evan groaned. "Great, I'm a local legend now." Ava laughed, and even he couldn't resist joining in. Sometimes laughter is how redemption knocks. After Emma left, the cafe grew quiet again. "People talk," Ava said. "But Grace doesn't need good publicity." Evan smirked. "It's still bad for my image. Maybe it's time you get a new one." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean the holy kind?" "No," she said softly. the human kind. He didn't reply, but something inside him did. As the day closed, the rain began again, soft, rhythmic, forgiving. Evan helped her lock up, hands brushing accidentally when they reached for the lights. Neither spoke. Outside, thunder rolled gently like a reminder that heaven listens. He looked at her one last time before walking to his car. "You ever get the feeling you're being rewritten?" he asked. Ava smiled. "Only when I stop fighting the author." He drove away slowly, headlights cutting through mist. Each raindrop on the windshield looked like punctuation on a story still being written. For the first time, Evan didn't dread tomorrow. He wondered instead what Grace would dare to teach him next. Behind him, the cafe lights went out one by one, but something inside him stayed lit. A quiet flame, small, stubborn, divine. That night, he dreamed of the church again, the blue door glowing under moonlight. He heard music but couldn't see the pianist. Only a voice whispering through the keys, "Come closer." When he woke, his hands were trembling, heart still beating to the rhythm of unseen grace. He sat up, breathing hard. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. He had just dreamed of peace, and it scared him more than failure ever did. He didn't know it yet, but that whisper would return. And next time it wouldn't wait for Sunday. Because grace never knocks once, it keeps coming until the door opens. And in the next chapter, Evan will discover what happens when faith starts answering back, when pain becomes purpose, when the man who mocked finds himself praying without words, and everything he thought he lost begins to find its way home. Monday dawned sharper than usual, the kind of morning that tests resolve. Evan woke early, poured black coffee, and stared at his reflection in the glass window. Something had changed, though he couldn't name it yet. He used to start his days scrolling through numbers and deadlines. Now he replayed piano notes and words about sparrows. Work called him back like gravity, and he obeyed, but not without hesitation. The city skyline blinked with ambition, and he felt like a foreigner returning to a country that no longer spoke his language. Grace had followed him home, and it was quietly dismantling his armor. At his company's office downtown, polished floors reflected the kind of success people worshipped. Colleagues greeted him with nods, quick smiles, shallow questions. "Back from vacation?" one asked. "Something like that," Evan replied, hiding the storm beneath the suit. He slipped into his corner office where walls of glass offered views and isolation. On his desk, a silver plaque read, "Efficiency creates power." He turned it face down without knowing why. Meetings filled the morning like static noise, charts, projections, deals. But his thoughts drifted, to laughter in the cafe, to soup lines that didn't judge, to a piano that healed without applause. When a client mocked those faith-driven charities wasting resources, the old Evan would have joined the laughter. Now something inside him flinched. He excused himself from the room, claiming a call. In truth, he just needed air that didn't smell like pride. Outside, he found the city too loud, too proud, too desperate to look perfect. He leaned against a stone wall, hands in his pockets, eyes lifted to the gray sky.
Why am I even feeling this?
He muttered. He didn't expect an answer, but sometimes silence speaks louder than thunder. His phone buzzed, a message from Ava. "Hope your Monday treats you kindly. Remember, grace works even in boardrooms." He smiled despite himself, the tension in his chest loosening. That afternoon, he stopped by the Blue Sparrow Café, unannounced. Ava was restocking pastries, hair tucked behind her ear, face framed by the soft glow of sunset. "You came back," she said, not surprised. "I told myself I wouldn't," he confessed. "So here I am." She laughed, and the sound made the cafe feel like home again. "Rough day?" "Just loud, the kind of loud that makes you miss silence." Ava poured him a cup before he asked. "Did you do something about that noise?" she asked. "I walked out of a meeting," he said. "That's a start. I think I offended half my team." Truth usually offends before it heals. He stared at her, realizing she wasn't talking about business anymore. They sat by the window as the light dimmed outside. Evan rubbed his temples. "Do you ever feel like you're changing too fast?" Ava nodded. "Yes. Growth feels like loss at first." He leaned back, her calm unraveling his anxiety. "You know, the world keeps telling me to be strong. And what do you think strength is?" she asked. He hesitated. "I used to think it was control." Maybe strength is staying soft in a hard place. Her words melted something deeper than logic. He wanted to believe her, but part of him still feared ridicule. What if people see it as weakness? Let them. Grace doesn't perform, it perseveres. He smiled faintly. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, Ava admitted. It's sacred. And in that moment, he began to understand that sacred and simple might be the same thing. Just then, the cafe door opened. A tall man in a gray suit walked in, sharp voice, colder eyes. Evan! I thought you'd quit humanity for a monastery. He joked loudly. It was Marcus, his former business partner. Evan forced a laugh. Just needed coffee, not confession. Marcus spotted Ava and smirked. And who's this saint? Ava smiled politely. Just a barista who believes in kindness. Marcus leaned in, tone mocking. You still chasing miracles, Evan? I always said you'd end up praying when the market crashed. Evan froze. The old him would have laughed it off. But not today. Maybe there are worse things than praying, he said quietly. Marcus scoffed. You're serious? The golden boy found religion? The cafe went silent except for the rain outside. Ava didn't speak. She just stood by him, her calm louder than any defense. Evan took a breath, steadying the tremor in his voice. I found peace, he said, and I won't apologize for it. Marcus blinked, unsure how to respond to conviction that didn't demand validation. Wow, guess even cynics have redemption arcs now, Marcus muttered, walking toward the door. Ava's eyes followed him, not with anger but compassion. When the door shut, she whispered, Grace walks through fire. You just did. Evan exhaled, shaking slightly. That burned more than I thought it would. You didn't burn, Ava said. You refined. Her words felt like balm on open wounds. He rubbed his hands, processing the moment. I think I'm scared, he admitted. Good, she said softly. Courage only exists where fear does. He looked at her, and something unspoken filled the space between them. The kind of silence that holds a heartbeat. That night, Ava locked up alone, but her thoughts stayed with him. She prayed, not for him to change faster, but deeper. God, let him see himself the way you do, she whispered. In his apartment, Evan stared at his ceiling, replaying every word she'd said. He didn't know prayer could sound like her voice, and when he finally closed his eyes, it wasn't business deals he dreamed of. It was a quiet cafe, and a woman who didn't argue with mockery, just answered it with grace. The next morning, Marcus called. Evan, listen, we've got investors on edge. Don't get weird on me. Religion ruins reputations. Evan closed his eyes, gripping the phone tightly. Maybe my reputation needs a little ruining, he said calmly. What's gotten into you? Peace, Evan replied, then hung up before doubt could interrupt. He sat back, realizing that peace costs, but it pays in freedom, and he was ready to start paying. By midday, Evan returned to the cafe, this time carrying 2 sandwiches. Lunch for the woman who made me ruin my image, he joked. Ava grinned. Best scandal I've heard today. They sat outside, the sun shyly peeking through clouds. For the first time, he didn't feel like 2 different people. He laughed freely, like someone who'd stopped pretending to be fine. And Ava saw it, the first spark of real transformation. He told her about Marcus's call, expecting her to be angry. Instead, she said, That's what fire does, it reveals what's solid. He tilted his head. You always talk like that? Like what? Like every sentence could heal someone. She shrugged. Words are seeds. You never know which ones will grow. He looked at her, realizing that grace was her language, and he was finally learning it. As the day faded, they walked by the river behind the cafe. Children threw stones that skipped across the water. Evan watched them and whispered, I used to think faith was fragile. And now? Now I think maybe it's fireproof. Ava smiled. That's because grace doesn't burn, it illuminates. For the first time, he believed her. The sky blazed orange as the sun dipped low. Ava's hair caught the light and for a second time froze. He wanted to say something, anything, but words failed him. Instead, he whispered, Thank you for not giving up on me. I didn't do anything, she said. Grace did. He nodded, but his eyes told a different story. Sometimes gratitude sounds a lot like love beginning to bloom. As they said goodbye, Ava's last words lingered. Remember, fire doesn't just destroy, it refines. That night, Evan opened the Bible she'd once left on the counter for anyone to borrow. He didn't read much, just one verse that caught his eye. I will bring you through the fire, and you will come out as gold. He closed the book, exhaled and whispered into the quiet, then let it burn. The next morning, he didn't run from the reflection in the mirror. He looked himself in the eye for the first time in years. The man staring back wasn't who he used to be, but not yet who he'd become. And that in-between space, that was where Grace worked best. Because transformation doesn't shout, it whispers between moments of surrender. And in the next chapter, Evan will learn what happens when his past comes knocking, when old sins return to test new faith, and Ava's grace faces its own fire. The next few days unfolded in quiet rhythm, coffee, conversations, laughter that didn't demand meaning. Evan had started helping at the cafe after work, claiming it helped him think better. Ava pretended not to notice the way he lingered even after closing time. The town had grown used to seeing them together, two opposites slowly orbiting the same piece. He swept floors. She sang softly while stacking chairs. It was the kind of ordinary holiness most people miss, until the past decided to interrupt it. Thursday afternoon, the doorbell rang harder than usual. A woman walked in, her heels sharp against the wooden floor, perfume slicing through the cinnamon air. "Evan," she called before even seeing him. Ava froze mid-step, a plate still in her hand. He turned slowly. "Rebecca." The name fell like thunder in a sanctuary. Grace was about to be tested by memory. Rebecca Prescott, his former fiancée. She looked exactly as the city remembered her. Elegant, polished, untouchable. The kind of woman who turned silence into discomfort and beauty into distance. "I've been trying to reach you," she said, ignoring the cafe's quiet stares. Evan swallowed hard. "You found me." "I see that," she said, her eyes scanning the humble space. "So this is your new life?" Ava felt the tremor beneath her calm. "I didn't realize you still cared about where I worked," Evan said softly. Rebecca crossed her arms. "I cared when your name was still attached to mine in every article." Ava took a breath, stepped forward. "Can I get you something to drink?" Rebecca's gaze flicked to her, sharp as glass. "No, thank you." Silence stretched, heavy and brittle. The air smelled like espresso and old wounds. "Evan wanted to disappear, but Grace never lets us hide for long. Why are you here?" he asked finally. "To warn you," Rebecca replied. "Marcus is furious. You pulled out of the merger. He's talking lawsuits." Evan's jaw tightened. "He wouldn't dare." "Oh, he would," she said. "And your new reputation for whatever this is." She gestured vaguely toward Ava. "Won't help." Ava's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. Grace had met pride before. It knew how to stay still. Rebecca added quietly, "You're playing savior, but this world eats saints alive." Evan exhaled through his nose, gripping the counter. "I'm not trying to be a savior," he said. "I'm just trying to live like I'm forgiven." Rebecca blinked, confusion flickering across her perfect mask. "You really changed," she murmured. "Or maybe I finally started living," he replied. Her eyes softened just long enough to show the fracture beneath her strength. "Be careful, Evan. People love redemption stories until they cost something." When she left, the cafe felt smaller, quieter, heavier. Ava wiped the same spot on the counter 3 times without noticing. Evan stood by the window watching Rebecca's car disappear. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Ava said softly, "She looked hurt." "She was," he admitted. "But not by me. By the life we built on everything but truth." Ava nodded. "Even broken love leaves echoes." He turned toward her, eyes weary. "Did I just drag my mess into your peace?" "You brought honesty," she said. "That's not a mess, it's a beginning. But I hate that she saw you." "Why?" "Because she reminded me of who I was before all this." Ava smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's exactly what Grace wanted." He frowned. "You're too calm about this." "I trust the refiner's fire," she said simply. That night, word spread fast. Small towns never keep big secrets. People whispered that Evan's old flame had returned, that the cafe girl was just a phase. Ava heard it all quietly, while serving coffee with her usual grace. Evan noticed her silence when he arrived. "They're talking, aren't they?" he asked. "They always do," she said. "But Grace doesn't argue. It outlasts." Still, something in her tone carried weight he hadn't heard before. Later, when the cafe emptied, Ava sat by the window in the dim light. Evan joined her, guilt thick in his voice. I should have stopped her from showing up. You can't stop the past from visiting, she said. But you can stop it from staying. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You don't deserve this. I didn't choose you to avoid pain, Ava said gently. I chose truth. And truth, she knew, always brings fire before freedom. Outside, thunder began to roll across the hills. Rain followed, heavy and relentless, like grace washing everything dirty. Evan stared out the window. Marcus will come after me. Then we'll pray before he does, Ava replied. He turned toward her, voice cracking. You keep saying we, why? Because redemption is never a solo story, she whispered. And in that moment he understood. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. The next morning brought headlines and chaos. Prescott Holdings faces lawsuit threats, one paper read. His phone buzzed nonstop, reporters, partners, vultures dressed as colleagues. He ignored them all and went straight to the cafe. Ava met him with a calm only faith can teach. They'll say anything, he warned. Then let our actions be louder, she said, tying her apron. A group of regulars came in, whispering, pretending not to stare. Evan took their orders with Ava, unbothered, almost peaceful. When one man asked mockingly, So you serving coffee now, rich boy? Evan smiled. Yeah, best decision I ever made. The man blinked, unsure how to mock humility. Ava's chest swelled with quiet pride. Grace had just turned another wound into witness. At lunch, the cafe was busier than usual. Ava noticed unfamiliar faces, people who'd come just to see the fallen executive. She could feel the eyes, but she kept smiling, refilling cups and greeting everyone by name. Evan watched her and realized something profound. Faith doesn't need a microphone to change a room. It just needs consistency. And Ava had it. Day after day, storm after storm. When the rush finally ended, he said softly, I don't deserve you. Ava smiled. Good, then you won't take me for granted. He chuckled, shaking his head. You really believe God can use all this chaos for good? I don't just believe it, she said. I've seen it. Her voice carried certainty like a lighthouse through fog. And for the first time, Evan wanted to anchor there. Not as a guest, as someone who belonged. That night, they walked through the quiet streets after closing. Streetlights reflected off puddles like scattered stars. Evan stopped near the church with the blue door. I don't know how to pray for this, he admitted. Then I'll start, Ava said, taking his hand. She closed her eyes. God, teach us to trust you even when the fire spreads. He squeezed her fingers, whispering, Amen, whatever that means. When he opened his eyes, something inside had shifted. The lawsuit, the whispers, the past, it all seemed smaller now. Not because it vanished, but because something greater had arrived. Peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of someone bigger than it. And in that moment, Evan stopped resisting the idea of being saved. Not by religion, not by perfection, but by love that refused to quit. Days later, Marcus confronted him publicly at a shareholder meeting. You've gone soft, Marcus spat. You've ruined everything we built. Evan stood tall, voice calm. If everything we built couldn't survive truth, then it wasn't worth keeping. Gasps filled the room. For the first time, his words weren't for approval. They were for peace. And in that silence, heaven clapped quietly. Ava watched the clip later that night, tears in her eyes. When he came to the cafe afterward, she didn't say a word. She just walked around the counter and hugged him. He exhaled, the weight of years leaving his shoulders. Feels like I just walked out of a fire, he said. You did, she whispered. But look, you're still standing. He smiled faintly. And you're the reason, she shook her head. No, Evan, Grace is. That night, rain returned, softer this time, like a benediction. Ava wrote on the chalkboard before closing. The fire didn't burn me, it baptized me. Evan read it and smiled. You're going to make people talk again. Let them, she said, turning off the lights. Maybe they'll finally talk about the right thing. As they stepped into the night, thunder rumbled far away, no longer a threat, just music. And in the next chapter, the storm inside Evan will meet the healing he never dared ask for. Because grace isn't done yet, it's just getting started. The town woke to a restless sky. Low clouds pressing rooftops, wind braiding the trees. Ava opened the cafe early, humming a hymn that sounded like a steady hand. Evan arrived with pastries from the bakery that still trusted his awkward orders. "Storm's coming," he said, eyes on the horizon's bruised colors. "Storms teach us to listen," she answered, setting out mugs like anchors. They worked in a silence that wasn't empty, just reverent. Outside, thunder practiced its lines. Mid-morning brought a rush. Tourists, truckers, a teacher with ink on her sleeves. Ava moved through the room like a lighthouse, turn, shine, return, repeat. Evan refilled coffee, learning names he'd once have called irrelevant. When the rain finally opened, conversations softened to listen. Then the call came, Ava's phone vibrating like a sparrow trapped in her palm. Her face changed as she answered. The world narrowed to a voice. "Hospital," she whispered. "My mother." Chairs scraped, bells chimed, life continued in polite ignorance. Evan was already grabbing her coat before she thought to ask. "I'll drive," he said, not as a hero, as family. They ran into a rain that felt personal, each drop urgent. On the way, Ava stared out the window, knuckles white. "She was fine yesterday," she murmured. "We planted daisies." Grief arrived early, disguised as logic. The emergency room smelled like metal and hand sanitizer. A nurse with kind eyes spoke gently, words careful as porcelain. "Stroke," she said. "We're monitoring. She's stable but fragile." Ava nodded too quickly, like agreement could change outcomes. Evan touched her shoulder, small anchor in a shifting sea. "Can I see her?" Ava asked, almost childlike. "Soon," the nurse promised. "Breathe while you wait." They found a pew-like bench by a window the rain refused to leave. Ava's breath came in uneven stitch, courage fraying at the seams. "She reads Psalm 27 every morning," she said, voice thin. "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" Evan finished the line softly, surprised he knew it. Ava looked at him, a flicker of gratitude cutting through panic. "Believe for me," she whispered. "Just for now." He closed his eyes, the way he'd seen her do 100 times. Not eloquent, just honest, like she'd taught him. "God, I don't have the right words," he breathed. "But you have the right hands. Hold her. Please hold them both." The rain eased for 3 breaths, then started again, gentler. Ava leaned her head on his shoulder and finally inhaled fully. Peace doesn't always answer. Sometimes it accompanies. Hours stretched thin, nurses moving like practiced mercy. A doctor explained charts with softly colored pens. Words like clot, window, rehab floated around them like buoys. Ava asked questions that showed both faith and fierce love. Evan watched her negotiate fear, choosing truth over spirals. He realized courage wears aprons and wipes counters at dawn. It also cries without shame. When they were allowed in, her mother looked small but luminous. A silver strand of hair crossed her cheek like a signature. Ava took her hand and smiled like sunrise refusing night. "Hi, Mom, it's raining." "Your daisies are thrilled." Her mother blinked, slow and certain, squeezing once. Tears fell, permission slips from heaven. Evan stood back, guarding the holy ordinary. The nurse stepped in with a clipboard and the voice of Sabbath. "She'll need rest and later, therapy, patience, familiar faces." Ava nodded, memorizing each prescription for kindness. "I can cover mornings at the Café," Evan offered quickly. "And evenings," he added, surprising himself with the desire to serve. Ava turned, eyes wet, gratitude louder than thank you. "Then we'll be okay," she said, deciding hope. They returned to the waiting room where storms kept rehearsing. A child drew clouds with smiles. A man prayed into a hat. A vending machine hummed a tired hymn in E minor. Ava leaned forward, elbows on knees, fighting the dark edges. "Tell me something true," she said, not looking at him. Evan thought of boardrooms, false gods, new altars. "God is here," he said, "even when I'm not eloquent." She let that sentence sit inside her like warm bread. "Say it again," she asked, voice steadier. "God is here," he repeated, feeling it become his too. The lights flickered once, the storm testing the grid. "We might lose power," someone warned down the hall. Ava smiled faintly. "We won't lose light." "Faith can be defiance," whispered kindly. Afternoon folded into gray-blue evening, nurses trading shifts like psalms. Ava dozed for minutes, then woke to guilt for sleeping. "Rest is trust," Evan said, repeating her own theology back. She let herself sink into the bench, brave enough to be held. He covered her with his jacket. Ridiculous on paper, perfect in practice. Outside, rain softened to learning. Inside, grace patterned the room with presence. A volunteer chaplain stopped by, offering prayer without pressure. Ava nodded, eyes saying yes before her mouth did. They prayed in layered voices, humble as laundry. Not our will, but yours, the chaplain whispered, smiling goodbye. After, Ava exhaled like something heavy had confessed. I used to think surrender was quitting, she said. It's continuing without pretending, Evan answered. Visiting hours ended with the gentle tyranny of clocks. Ava kissed her mother's forehead, leaving hope like perfume. They walked into a parking lot rinsed clean by weather. The storm had moved to the next town but left its hymn. Evan opened the passenger door. Ava hesitated, listening inward. I'm not afraid, she said slowly. I'm just small. Then it's his turn to be big, he answered. Back at the cafe, the sign still glowed like a steadfast star. They brewed decaf for no one, ritual as comfort. Ava stood by the chalkboard, chalk trembling in her fingers. What do I write when I don't know the ending? She asked. Write the author's name, Evan said. Let him finish the line. Ava smiled, tears bright as truth. She wrote, Still I will trust. They sat in the corner booth where decisions quietly become vows. Tomorrow I'll be at the hospital at dawn, Ava said. You'll wake up to coffee already made, Evan replied. And customers who somehow know the right questions, she added. And a man who will believe for you when you're too tired, he finished. They didn't reach for hands. They reached for courage. Sometimes that's the same motion. Night settled like a quilt stitched by saints. Evan walked her home beneath a sky, finally remembering stars. At her door, neither hurried the goodbye. Thank you for staying, she said, voice soft as chapel light. I didn't stay, he answered. I belonged. The truth startled them both with its accuracy. They let it stand unedited. Alone later, Evan opened the Bible he wasn't ready to own. He found Psalm 46, the page that smelled faintly like Ava's hands. Be still and know that I am God, the verse insisted. He argued with it for a minute, then surrendered without drama. Stillness entered him like a tide deciding the shore. He whispered, I'll be the stillness. You be the God. He slept without bargaining. Morning returned with the exact kindness they'd requested. Ava's mother had improved, tiny gains that felt like fireworks. A nurse smiled. She's responding faster than we expected. Ava cried the good kind, relief untying every knot. She texted Evan 3 words. He heard us. He closed his eyes in the empty cafe and said thank you aloud. Some prayers deserve to be overheard. That night, Ava played piano in the dark sanctuary, keys like raindrops reversed. Evan sat in the back pew, still learning how to witness without fixing. Her melody wasn't triumph. It was trust-wearing music. When the final chord faded, they didn't clap, they breathed. Outside, the sky held its peace like a promise kept. And next chapter, surrender will look like strength when a choice no one wanted arrives. Because storms end, but the stillness teaches us how to walk afterward. Morning sunlight spilled across the cafe floor like quiet mercy. Ava opened late for the first time in years. A small act of surrender. Her mother's recovery was steady but delicate. Every smile a victory. The townspeople noticed. Kindness returned like birds after rain. Evan watched her balance duty and faith as if they were twin wings. He'd never seen strength so unforced, so unadvertised. Grace didn't need applause, it just needed room. But beneath the peace, a decision waited. The doctor had suggested full-time care at a rehab center 2 towns away. Ava could go with her mother, or stay and keep the cafe alive. Both choices felt right. Both felt wrong. That night, she sat at the piano in silence, fingers still on the keys. Evan stood nearby, reading the conflict in her eyes. Some prayers don't ask for answers, she whispered. They ask for courage. He wanted to fix it, to plan, to reason, to build. But he remembered her teaching. Not every storm needs solving. Whatever you decide, he said, don't choose guilt. Ava smiled faintly. That's the hardest thing for women who love too much. He nodded, unsure whether to hold her hand or just hold space. The distance between them felt sacred, not sad. Love, real love, knew how to wait without demand. The next morning, Ava packed her mother's favorite cardigan and photo frame. She'd made her choice. Go with her, at least for the first few weeks. Evan helped fold blankets, each motion gentler than words. Will you promise to keep the cafe open? She asked quietly. Promise, he said. I'll even keep the chalkboard honest. Ava laughed through tears. Then write something true every morning. I'll try, he said, meaning it. The day she left, the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Customers brought flowers, cards, hugs disguised as errands. Evan stood at the curb. watching the car disappear down the winding road. The cafe keys felt heavier than any boardroom he'd ever entered. Inside, he made coffee too strong, too bitter, but refused to waste it. He wrote on the chalkboard, "Faith works even when hearts break." Then he exhaled, whispering, "This one's for you, Ava." Days turned into a pattern of service and small miracles. Evan learned the rhythm of morning regulars, the exact spot sunlight hit the counter. He prayed in sentences that began as sarcasm and ended as truth. At night, he'd text Ava updates. "We sold out a pie again." She'd reply, "God multiplies crumbs." Each message built a bridge across distance and doubt. Even silence between them felt purposeful. But one afternoon, a letter arrived, official, cold, legal. Marcus had filed the lawsuit. The words financial misconduct and defamation glared like accusations. Old panic rose, the kind that makes faith tremble. Evan locked the door, knelt by the counter, and prayed like breathing. "God, I don't know what to do, but you do." And for the first time, he believed that was enough. He called Ava, but hesitated when she answered. "I heard," she said gently. "Marcus won't win. Lies don't last." Her voice was calm, not careless. It carried peace, not denial. "I don't want you worrying about this," he said. "Too late," she smiled. "Love doesn't follow legal advice." Evan laughed softly, relief sneaking through fear. Her faith had become his second heartbeat. That night, he opened her mother's Bible she'd left on a cafe shelf. Inside was a note in Ava's handwriting. "You'll need this when I'm gone." He turned to a marked page, Isaiah 43. "When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned." The verse hit him like prophecy disguised as comfort. He whispered, "I'm walking through it now." But beneath the fear, there was stillness, the kind only grace builds from ashes. The next morning, the cafe was busier than ever. Customers came not just for coffee, but for steadiness. They saw peace behind the counter and found it contagious. Evan didn't preach, but every act of kindness was its own sermon. A tired nurse, a widowed farmer, a teenage girl, each left lighter than they came. Grace had learned his name and used it daily. And without Ava, he was learning what faith looks like when no one's watching. A week later, a reporter showed up with a camera. "Mr. Prescott, we'd like your comment on the lawsuit." Evan wiped his hands on a towel, smiled faintly. "Tell them I found something better than winning." The reporter frowned. "And what's that?" "Peace," he said and walked away. The segment aired that night and went viral. Ava saw it from her mother's hospital room. Her mother chuckled softly, whispering, "That's the boy?" Ava smiled, cheeks warm. "That's the man." They watched him speak about integrity, faith, and coffee with dignity. "Sounds like you're both being refined," her mother said. "Maybe that's what love really is," Ava replied. Two fires learning not to burn each other. Evan's phone exploded with messages, some mocking, some curious. But amid the noise came one from Rebecca. "Proud of you. Didn't think you'd actually change." He stared at the screen for a long moment before typing, "Change wasn't mine. It was given." He hit send, and for the first time that chapter truly closed. Grace had rewritten his story line by line. Even the painful edits made sense now. Weeks passed. Ava's mother improved faster than expected. Therapists called her recovery unusual, but Ava called it answered prayer. They planned to return home by the end of the month. Evan prepared the cafe like a homecoming feast. He fixed the leaky roof she'd joked about months ago. Every corner carried evidence of devotion disguised as daily chores. Love had moved in quietly and rearranged the furniture. The night before her return, the town was calm and expectant. Evan wrote on the chalkboard for the last time alone. "Some promises are worth keeping forever." He turned off the lights, feeling something holy in the anticipation. Outside, the sky blushed pink as if heaven itself prepared a welcome. He whispered a short prayer. "Let her see what you've done here." And peace answered like a nod. When Ava walked in the next morning, everything felt new yet familiar. The smell of coffee, the bell's chime, the framed verse on the wall. Evan looked up from behind the counter, smile unsure, eyes certain. "You kept your promise," she said, voice trembling. "Every morning," he replied. "Even the hard ones." She looked around, the roof fixed, flowers blooming, customers laughing. "This place, it feels alive," she said softly. "It's not the same cafe," Evan said. "It's not the same man," she answered. Their eyes held a quiet confession, neither rushed to speak aloud. "I prayed you wouldn't lose faith," she admitted. "I didn't," he said. "I borrowed yours until mine grew." She blinked back tears, whispering, "That's what love does." And for the first time, he didn't argue with the word. Later they closed early, sitting by the river that once echoed their doubts. The water shimmered under gold light, quiet but unstoppable. Evan threw a pebble. It skipped, then sank. "Feels like everything we survived is teaching us how to stay," he said. "Staying is harder than leaving," Ava replied. "Then we'll stay anyway," he said. And she smiled, knowing they both finally meant it. That night, Ava's mother visited the cafe for the first time since the stroke. Customers clapped softly when she walked in, leaning on her cane. "You've built something beautiful," she told Evan. "We just tended what God planted," he said. She squeezed Ava's hand. "Then keep watering." Laughter filled the room like sunlight finding cracks in the floor. It wasn't perfect, but it was holy. As they closed for the night, Ava stood by the door looking at the chalkboard. Evan joined her, his sleeve brushing hers. "What will tomorrow's message be?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Maybe this one doesn't need words." She smiled. "Maybe it just needs us." And in the next chapter, love will face its final test, not through loss, but through calling. Because when grace completes its work, hearts don't break, they expand. The morning began with light soft as forgiveness slipping through the cafe windows. Ava brewed coffee quietly, humming her mother's favorite hymn. Evan arrived early, tie forgotten, sleeves rolled up, peace in his movements. Life had found its rhythm again, simple, sacred, whole. But peace never means permanence. Sometimes it's the calm before a new chapter. On the counter, a letter waited, cream paper, golden seal. The sender, the Grace Foundation for Community Restoration. Ava read it twice, heart pacing between gratitude and fear. They wanted her to lead a new outreach program, teaching underprivileged women life skills and faith-based leadership. It was everything she'd once dreamed of, except it was 3 states away. She looked up at Evan, who was fixing the espresso machine. "Good news?" he asked, smiling without looking. She hesitated. "Beautiful news. Complicated timing." The silence that followed felt holy and heavy. Evan met her gaze, eyes steady but searching. "You've been called," he said quietly. "It feels like it," she admitted, tears hiding behind strength. He nodded slowly, like someone rehearsing surrender. "Then you have to go." Her lip trembled. "Even if it means leaving you?" He smiled sadly. "Especially then." They stood in the middle of the cafe, surrounded by memories that still smelled like cinnamon and rain. The same place that had healed him now asked him to let her go. "God's stories don't end," Ava whispered. "They just change location." He exhaled, the kind of breath that sounds like both grief and worship. "You taught me how to pray," he said. "Now I guess I'll practice." She laughed softly, eyes glistening. "And I'll pray you never stop finding grace in small things." They didn't need promises. Their silence kept them. That evening, they walked to the river one last time. The water shimmered in twilight, carrying their reflection like testimony. "I used to think faith was for weak people," Evan said. "And now?" "Now I know it's for the brave," Ava smiled. "Then you finally fit the description." He reached for her hand, not to hold her back but to bless her forward. Days passed in a blur of preparation and unspoken prayers. The cafe filled with farewells. Notes tucked under saucers, blessings written on napkins. Even Marcus sent an email dropping the lawsuit. "You win, Prescott. Or maybe we both do." Evan read it and smiled, grace finishing what pride had started. Ava's mother hugged him tightly the night before departure. "Take care of her work while she takes care of his," she said. He promised and meant every word. The morning of her departure, the sky was clear enough to make faith visible. Ava wore a simple white dress, suitcase by her feet, heart somewhere between hope and heartbreak. Evan walked her to the station, hands deep in his pockets, mind deeper in prayer. "You think it'll be easy?" she asked, half laughing. "No," he said, "but nothing worth keeping ever is." They stood there, 1,000 words trapped in the space between them. Only Grace spoke fluently. When the train arrived, Ava turned to face him fully. "You were my miracle," she said, voice trembling but sure. Evan smiled. "No, Ava. You were the one who reminded me God still writes them." She pressed a small Bible into his hand. For the days I can't remind you myself. He nodded, unable to speak. And when the doors closed, he whispered into the wind, "Go where grace leads." The train left and something inside him stayed behind, shining. Weeks turned to months. Evan ran the cafe with quiet devotion and an apron stained by miracles. The town grew used to his steady kindness, his chalkboard verses, his soft laugh. Every message he wrote began with today's grace. Ava's letters arrived regularly, folded, fragrant, alive. She wrote of women learning to rebuild, of hope spreading like yeast. He read every word twice, sometimes aloud when the cafe felt empty. Her words carried warmth through distance. Faith doesn't shrink with miles, it expands. Don't let the rain make you doubt the harvest. You're exactly where God still needs light. Each line felt like conversation, not correspondence. Evan no longer counted days. He counted transformations. Because love rooted in God doesn't fade, it multiplies quietly. And heaven takes attendance at every act of kindness. One autumn morning, a package arrived, no return address, just his name. Inside, a single sparrow feather and a note. "For your window. We're never too far to fly." He laughed through tears, taping it near the cash register where everyone could see. Customers asked its meaning. He only smiled. "Grace leaves traces," he said. It became the cafe's emblem, the silent sermon over every cup. Faith had turned nostalgia into ministry. Months later, he received an invitation printed in gold ink. The Grace Foundation Annual Gala. Guest of honor, Ava Williams. At the bottom, a handwritten line, "If you can come, bring the sparrow." He stared at it, heart racing. The event was in the city he'd once ruled and escaped. He felt both called and terrified. But grace doesn't ask comfort. It asks obedience. That evening, he stood before the mirror that once reflected ambition. Now it showed redemption in rolled sleeves and humility. He wore a suit again, but this time without armor. He slipped the feather into his pocket and whispered, "Let me see what you've done." The drive felt like returning to an old battlefield-turned garden. The skyline glittered, not like temptation but testimony. Even the air smelled forgiven. The gala hall was full. Music, laughter, stories of impact. And then she appeared. Ava, radiant, poised, eyes full of everything heaven never takes back. When she saw him across the room, her breath caught. He walked toward her slowly, reverently, like approaching an answered prayer. "I brought the sparrow," he said softly, showing the feather. She laughed, eyes shining. "You always did keep your promises." They talked through the evening, weaving memories into purpose. She told him about the women whose lives had been rebuilt, one prayer at a time. He told her about the cafe, now hosting community meals and scripture nights. "It's not mine anymore," he said. "It belongs to whoever needs hope." Ava nodded. "That's what grace does, it keeps giving itself away." Music played, a slow hymn disguised as jazz. And for a moment they just listened. When the event ended, they stepped outside beneath a sky of gentle stars. The city lights blinked like distant candles. "I thought I'd lost you forever," Evan confessed. "You didn't lose me," Ava said. "You released me. And now?" "Now grace brought me home," she smiled. And in that sentence, distance died quietly. They walked together through the quiet streets, not rushing the miracle. Every step felt like proof that surrender doesn't mean goodbye, it means trust. Evan stopped near a fountain, the same kind where he'd once mocked prayer. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for making me fall for her grace." Ava reached for his hand, tears mixing with laughter. "You didn't fall," she said. "You finally learned to kneel." He smiled because both were true. When dawn broke, they returned to the cafe 2 days later, side by side again. The town gathered, clapping, celebrating without needing an explanation. Evan hung a new sign above the counter. "Grace Grounds Café, esteemed by miracles." Ava looked around, eyes glistening. "You kept the soul of it." He nodded. "You gave it back to me." Her mother wiped tears in the corner booth. Hearts that surrender become homes. They worked together again. Rhythm natural, laughter holy. Customers noticed how peace seemed thicker when they were in the same room. Some called them lucky. Others whispered blessed. But Ava just smiled and said, "We're both." Every act of kindness felt like worship, every cup like communion. They'd stopped performing faith. They were now living it, and heaven, quietly, kept score. One evening after closing, Ava wrote the final message on the chalkboard. He mocked her faith, but God made him fall for her grace. Evan stood beside her, reading it with a soft smile. "That's the story," he said, "but not the ending." "No," she whispered, "just the beginning of service." Outside, the wind carried laughter through the trees like prayer answered in motion, and together they turned off the lights, leaving the sign glowing in grace. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who once doubted grace, because sometimes the people who mock faith the loudest are the ones God plans to use the most. Subscribe, comment your favorite line, and let grace keep writing your story.